Members, good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of Panel on Constitutional Affairs. We formed a quorum and it's also the appointed time. May I call the meeting to order? The first item is information papers issued since the last meeting. Since our last meeting, the Secretariat has issued one paper as set out on the agenda. Is the Electoral Affairs Commission report on the 2022 Electoral Election Committee constituency by election. If there is no question on this, we go on to the second item. We have got the list of outstanding items for this discussion, and please refer to the list. And then the next meeting will be scheduled for the 15th of May 2023 at 2:30 p.m. The administration has got two suggestions for us. A, amendments to the regional flag and regional emblem ordinance, and second, the creation of two permanent directorate posts in the Electoral Affairs Office. Yes, Dr. Tick. Before the Executive Council meeting, the Chief Executive mentioned a review of the district councils. Can we include that in our next meeting? Or else we may not have the opportunity to discuss the outcome of the review. Yes, this morning the Chief Executive mentioned the review of the district councils. I have expressed to the administration that hopefully they can come to us to brief us on the details of the review. I suggested that we can handle that using a special meeting because we are all eager to have an early discussion of the item. If members share the same view, which I believe will be very much the case, anyway, I have made that point to the administration. Probably we'll have a special meeting. I put that to the administration once again today. Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, if there are no further views, we go on to the third item of the agenda. Please invite the administration to join us now. The third item is meetings of the United Nations Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights for consideration of the fourth report of the Hong Kong SAR under the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Yes. Administration, please be seated. I will invite Mr. Clement Wu, Undersecretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, to walk us through the paper before I open the floor to members. Over to you, Mr. Wu. Thank you. The United Nations Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights held a meeting on the 15th and 16th of February this year to consider the fourth report of the Hong Kong SAR under the ICSCR. The fourth report of the SAR formed parts of the ninth report of the PRC. Now, we attended as member of the Chinese delegation. The Chinese delegation was headed by Ambassador Chen Yu, China's permanent representative to the UN office in Geneva and other international organizations in Switzerland. The permanent secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs was one of the deputy heads of the Chinese delegation, myself, and also colleagues from the CMAB and representatives from the Labor Department, Education Bureau, and Security Bureau, Department of Justice, Immigration Department were also present. And in the opening, The head of the Chinese delegation, Ambassador Chen Xu, and two deputy heads of the SAR and Macau SAR governments delivered opening remarks. And in her opening statement, PSCMA said that under the double standards of the implementation of the law of the People's Republic of China on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong SAR, an improved electoral system, Hong Kong is back on the right track of one country, two systems from the past turbulence, and people return to their day-to-day life in peace and stability was resumed. The Hong Kong people continue to enjoy the legitimate rights and freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution of the PRC, the Basic Law of Hong Kong, and the relevant provisions of international covenants as applied to Hong Kong. She illustrated the committed determination of the government to improve people's livelihood, and the discussion was under a certain framework, and certain questions and views were made, and they major ones covered the implementation of the national security law in Hong Kong, the trade unions' rights, the situation of foreign domestic worker helpers in Hong Kong, trafficking in person, academic freedom, poverty alleviation, and elderly services and housing needs, etc. During the meeting, the SAR deputation addressed questions asked by the committee. As far as possible, we provided targeted responses to allay their concerns and dispel their misunderstanding, and we told them that we are committed to safeguarding the legitimate rights of Hong Kong SAR. And then following the rules, within 48 hours of the meeting, we provided supplementary information to the Central People's Government to address outstanding issues. In the two-day meeting, we adopted an open, respectful, cooperative, and responsible manner and engaged the committee in a dialogue. However, the concluding observations by the committee made rather inaccurate, biased, and misleading statements. They asked us to review the national security law. They cast out on the enforcement action by the SL during the black cloud violence, and also the protection of the rights of FDH, etc., and also our treatment of trade union rights. They expressed rather misleading comments, and then we issued a press release to strongly reject the committee's misleading conclusion observations, and we made very strong responses to the so-called concerns raised by the committee. Now, the next report is due by the 31st of March 2028, and we were required to, within 2 years, i.e. March 2025, provide relevant information on the appropriate safeguards for the implementation of the national security law. Since the reunification of the motherland, we have upheld one country, two systems. This will ensure the long-term prosperity and stability of Hong Kong is the best interest for Hong Kong and the country. We'll make good use of the opportunities under the 14th Five-Year Plan, the Belt and Road Initiatives, and the GBA development, so that Hong Kong can fully grasp these opportunities. And with the successful implementation of one country, two systems, we will move ahead. The inaccurate and biased accusations by the committee will be resolutely rejected by the SL government, and we will make use of every opportunity available to tell good stories of Hong Kong. We invite members to comment on the paper. We will listen very carefully to your comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Under Secretary. 6 members have pressed the request to speak button. Now there are 7. I read out the speaking order. Professor Chen Wing-Kwong, Mr. Martin Liu, Dr. Dick Chi-Yun, Mr. Teng Fei, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok, Dr. Priscilla Leung, and Mr. Hui Simon Lee, Deputy Chairman. Each member can have up to 4 minutes for both questions and answers. Professor Chen Wing-Kwong. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the biased observations by the UN Committee on ICSER, they made inaccurate, biased, and misleading observations on the implementation of national security law in Hong Kong. This is disappointing, and I feel rather angry about that. The SL government, however, has insisted on making clear to them the actual situation in Hong Kong, and the government also issued press releases to set the record straight. This is a necessary move, but issuing press releases alone will not be able to offset the negative impact of the misleading statements made by the committee. So I would like to know whether the government will take more proactive measures to ensure that the committee will not use biased views to look at Hong Kong. For instance, we should show documentaries to them to show that how Hong Kong has moved from chaos to stability and good governance. And after the misleading observations, in addition to issuing a press release, can we act more decisively? For instance, indicating our discontent to the committee and point out the inaccurate and misleading conclusions so that the public would not be misled. Thank you. Mr. Wu, thank you, Professor Chen, for your views. In December, we came to the panel to talk about our participation in the hearing of the committee. So before we went on the trip and during the process, and after we come back, we've issued press releases, and our local media, we've also gave an account of the hearing to the local media. We also quoted the views of the committee on Hong Kong SAL. There was very clear coverage of our refutes an objection to the accusations made, and we have made balanced responses. And in December, we came to this committee or this panel to explain to members. This is the fourth report of the SAL and the third to the country, and our report is included in part of the country's report. So we have been following the line to take of the country, whether it be the preparatory stage and during the meeting in Geneva and afterwards. We have been working with the country in making responses. I thank Professor Chen for his suggestion whether we will use our own footages to, in future deliberations, in publicity, and how how the video should be made. I thank Professor Chen for his suggestion. And enhancing the SL government's ability to counter smearing statements by other countries. Now we will resolutely reject such inaccurate coverage and make corrections at once. Every time we go on overseas missions, we always tell good stories of Hong Kong, and the border is now fully opened, and we have been publicizing the advantages of Hong Kong to different parts of the world. We are telling them the actual situation in Hong Kong. We also reject and refute untrue and biased accusations. We have also held major events in Hong Kong to tell good stories of Hong Kong and to allow expatriates to come to Hong Kong to see for themselves. For instance, just last month, we had Art Basel. We've also held Rugby 7. These are good examples. Our ETUs overseas also have promotional activities to tell good stories of Hong Kong and to tell them the actual situation in Hong Kong, we take on board the suggestion from Professor Chen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Martin Liao. Thank you. Chair, on the relevant misleading comments regarding national security by the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, I have to express my anger. The Hong Kong delegation has tried their best to illustrate our points so that we could get our message across. I wonder if after the meeting, have you conducted any review as to how effective your messages has gotten across? And in March 2022, on recommendations regarding the implementation of the national security law, we were asked to supply additional information. I believe that after 2 years of implementation of the national security law, we would have accumulated quite a number of cases. The committee has been expressing their views in their usual way. So I would like to know, other than the principles stated in the fourth report, I wonder if the administration has considered adopting other formats of presentation to show the world the implementation of the national security law. Thank you. Mr. Wu. During the meeting, we have tried our best to respond to the questions of the committee during the allotted time. And of course, for each question, they cover the mainland, Macau, and Hong Kong as well. So within the limited time, we have made our response. And within 48 hours, we could provide supplementary information to respond to the questions. And during our response, very often we include data. We want to give them a clear picture in our response. As for multimedia response, or video clips as suggested by Professor Chen earlier, we will definitely consider that. As for the request of supplying additional information regarding the proper implementation of the national security law by March 2035, we have followed the appropriate steps to provide the suitable protection. We were accused of arresting and putting activists on trial without proper ground. We have refuted these accordingly. And in 2025, we will, of course, produce data to illustrate how we have been implementing the national security law. And in due course, we will submit the relevant data to the Central People's Government. Since we are part of our country, we will submit the relevant data to the Central People's Government as well. I wonder if colleagues from the Security Bureau has anything to add. If not, then that's all from me. I would like to hear from the Security Bureau. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Liao. Like what the Undersecretary has just said, during the meeting, we have responded to these unfounded allegations. In 2 years' time, when we have to submit the results or conclusions to the committee, we will definitely consider other formats, like what members have suggested, such as video clips or other multimedia formats, to respond to the relevant comment. And in our response, other than just stating our points, we will also include the positive effect that the national security law has brought about. We hope that we will, by then, have more data or information to respond to their comments. Thank you. Next, Dr. Teck Chi-yuen. Thank you, Chair. First, I welcome the government's press release dated 16th of February. While safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong SAR, the national security law has respected human rights in Hong Kong. And in accordance with the provisions of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights and the ICESCR, we have respected our citizens' right to assembly, freedom of speech, etc. All activities in Hong Kong have to comply with the above principles. I would like to raise some examples. Lately, with the relaxation of the epidemic restrictions, there have been some public demonstration or rallies. But the government has set certain obstacles for participants. They have to put name card around their neck, etc. And for this reason, many public demonstrations have been cancelled. I would like to know more about the restrictions or the newly imposed restrictions on public demonstration after the pandemic. This may leave the impression that with the implementation of the national security law, our citizens' freedom of demonstration is being hampered. Second, on universal suffrage, I wonder if the government has any concrete timetable or roadmap for the universal suffrage of Legislative Council and the Chief Executive. I believe that in the future, we need to take a more proactive approach. With Hong Kong becoming more prosperous, we should be able to tell the world that Hong Kong is a stable and prosperous society. Thank you. Mr. Wu, before the Security Bureau responds to questions regarding a peaceful demonstration, I will first respond to the issue of universal suffrage. We have made replies before, but I would like to stress that for the current term government, our priority is to improve the livelihood of our people. Not long ago, the national security law was passed and the electoral system has been improved. This has been a major change in the constitutional system of Hong Kong. So for the current term government, for these 5 years, our priority is to improve the livelihood of our people. But of course, we have to undertake works in other regards as well, like what Dr. Teck suggested on universal suffrage. After the reform of the electoral system, we have included requirements such as Patriot administering Hong Kong, which should be in place all along. So I believe that we need to allow some time for the system to run on track. As for liaising with the international community, actually, this is my second time at meetings of this kind. When I refer to the past information, regardless of how we respond or what kinds of information or data we submit, or any types of statements that we make at the meeting, of our NGOs who have submitted their observations or other supporting documents in favor of the national security law, and that people's rights are still being protected as long as you do not violate the national security law, even though all these protections are still in place. the committee still maintain their stance. I believe that this is a long-term battle. We have to be committed. Each time when we submit a report, we have to tie in with the overall direction of our country's report to see what types of responses we should make to the committee. As for the demonstration request, perhaps I'll invite colleagues from the Security Bureau. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. In Hong Kong, freedom of assembly and demonstration is protected under the Basic Law. And it is stated clearly that under the International Covenant of Human Rights, these rights are not absolute and they need to be regulated under the law. When the police receive applications, they have to assess the relevant risk, especially risk on public order and national security. We have to strike a right balance. Then the police will assist the demonstration to go smoothly. However, the police will still need to take relevant precautions so that the demonstration will not be hijacked by other parties. Well, for many demonstrators, their demands are regarding livelihood. So like what Mr. Wu said, perhaps they should be allowed to voice their opinions. Next, Mr. Tang Fei. As a special administrative region of China, we form part of the delegation to the meeting of the committee. So it is our obligation to report to them. And I appreciate the efforts that the administration has put in this regard. I don't think that this is a pleasant experience because the process of the committee has been very misleading and biased, which I'm sure does not make it a pleasant experience. So I appreciate the efforts that you have put in. That being said, the United Nations is a large-scale stage which determines the direction of public opinions. Each time we submit our report, and then the United Nations have scrutinized them and issue comments, and then we respond to their comments. Each time it is like this. So I wonder if more can be done. Can we adopt a more flexible approach other than issuing press releases? Can we do more? Like in paragraph 10 of the paper, for the so-called inaccurate, biased, and misleading statements, they are mainly outlined in paragraph 7 to 8. So next time, when we submit reports to the UN, is it possible for us to arrange a site visit to Hong Kong so that they can assess the situation outlined in paragraph 7 to 8 by themselves? We have to take targeted approach. We want to take targeted approach to address their concerns. Otherwise, we are always doing the same thing. After we submitted a report, then they issue their comments, and then we respond to their comments. It's like this every time. Is it possible for us to go an extra mile so that we can still have our say on the international stage? UN. If I access the website of the ETO in New York, I could not find any information on UN, let alone any specified committee. So for our ETOs overseas, is it possible for them to do more so that we can tell stories of Hong Kong?
Yes. Still about how or whether we can use a new approach to tackle such reports. Otherwise, we are always on the defensive. Yes, our overseas ETOs, as I said, they will be more proactive in telling good stories of Hong Kong and China to let the world know the actual situation in Hong Kong, to the international community, the business community, the political community, as well as the media. Mr. Tang suggested that I invite members of the committee to come to see for themselves in Hong Kong. Now, the UN, the commissioner for UN, issued some guidelines on country visits in 2005/4. The High Commissioner doesn't really recommend inviting members of the committee to visit these places because that may be perceived to be influencing the outcome of the deliberations. So it was more than a decade ago when the guidelines were issued, and so we have never invited any member from these UN committees to come to Hong Kong. We've never done that. Thank you. What about the ETOs? They just publicize Hong Kong is not good enough. Shouldn't these press releases be uploaded to the website of the ETOs as well? Yes, that can be considered. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. The report from the UN Commission can only be described in the following. I am very disappointed and I strongly reject the concluding observations. They treat reports as truth. They use a sophistry to come to unfounded, unbiased conclusions. Let me quote some example. Para 100, judicial independence. Now, according to report, it's been reported that the national security law has, in effect, removed the judicial independence of Hong Kong. Para 101, we're asked to review the national security law to ensure that we have full judicial independence, and the national security law will not be arbitrarily used to interfere with judicial independence. What are the reasons for their coming to this conclusion? And para 102, our trials are intransparent. In fact, all our trials are open. How can they say that we are not being fair? And as a member of the public, when we see any law-breaking activity, shouldn't we report to it? And para 103, we should ensure that at each and every stage there should be proper and effective legal representatives. Is it that defendants cannot have their own independent lawyers? Of course, the government has argued against these. They have also issued a press release, but I agree with Professor Chen and also what Mr. Martin Leo said. What we have done is not sufficient. According to a report, we have 2 years to give a supplementary report to them. I'm of the view that we must not wait until that date. Now, in between now and the deadline, I think we can do something as well. We must not remain silent. We must clearly and tell them that their conclusions are unfounded, unjustified. We have to tell them every day and refute their accusations every time. We should tell the whole world. We should not just issue a press release which will be forgotten very soon. Apart from issuing press releases, I'd like to know whether the officials responsible have held any press briefings with the participation of the foreign press. Do you know that our officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs come out to face the media on a regular basis? Given that we're being smeared in this way, why don't we tell the international media the truth? The SL government should think twice as to how to handle such situations. Mr. Wu, regular press briefings. Please respond. Thank you. Yes, I share the anger and dismay of Mr. Lai. I feel the same. So in the first paragraph of our press release, upon receiving that concluding observations, we said that we express strong objection to the concluding observations. The committee selectively believed and made sweeping statements based on certain false information and distorted narratives, regardless of the truth, and made one-sided and flawed comments on the main human rights situation in Hong Kong in the so-called concluding observations, even politicized his works, etc. So we will consider the suggestions from Mr. Lai. In any further report to be submitted to the committee, it will form part of the country's report, but we will continue and non-stop tell good stories of Hong Kong. Dr. Priscilla Leung. With regard to the concluding observations by the UN Committee on ESCR, I express strong disappointment. I have been studying international law and international order. I very much hope that when the UN's committee consider our next report, it should act in a fair manner. I have every respect for this organization because after World War II, we must be fair to all countries. Now, I'm afraid that the report may backfire because the Secretary General just not long ago complained about being bugged by a certain strong nation. So he himself is a victim. Now, Para 102 says that some lawyers in Hong Kong has been disqualified or barred from practicing. This is a very strange remark. Well, in any country, if a lawyer is found to have committed bribery or corruption, etc., they can be disqualified. I don't know why there is such a conclusion. It's out of context. I hope they can give us a report that live up to the name of United Nations next time. And Para 105. It wants to interfere into our convention and culture, as if all the accusations have happened, discrimination against people on the basis of sexual orientation. I think they should do some research themselves. I have received many complaints of people being sacked because they once spoke up against same-sex marriages. In fact, there is no discrimination in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, rather, we have reverse discrimination. We just don't want things to happen. We don't want legislation. Because in Canada, in the UK, in Western countries, you can see that some secondary schools are so worried that they dare not allow their girl students to wear skirts. The report to the 20th National People's Congress by Presidency asks us to deepen our Chinese culture. Many people in Hong Kong would like to maintain heterosexual marriages and homogeneous marriages. We have Article 19.3 and 18.4 of Human Rights Convention. Now, parents can choose schools according to their religious belief, and under Article 19.3, different people from different ethnic minorities can choose their own religion. No one has interfered with people's sexual orientation. So Para 105 is really jumping to a conclusion. What kind of a UN nation is this? Is it just like our secondary school students doing liberal studies? They just cut and paste from press reports. I don't really want to comment on such a poor report from the UN committee. The SL government must really do more. It's just like in 2019 when we had the riots. At every 4 p.m., the police held press briefings. Because I have got friends and relatives who live in the U.S., they never knew that someone was stabbed to death, and then someone was burned alive, and then petrol bombs were hurled at shopping malls. They never knew about those things. Well, in the southern part of the U.S., they had such chaos and riots and lawsuits. They wanted to come to Hong Kong. No, we must say no to these things. You can learn from the 4 p.m. police press briefings. You should continue to put up advertisements in Western media. You should continue to tell them the truth of Hong Kong. Thank you. Deputy Chairman, Dr. Hui Li. Thank you. I am very angry and very dissatisfied with the report by the UN committee because they are being highly unprofessional, and I think they have brought shame on the United Nations in general. Now, I want to thank the administration. As Mr. Tang Fei said, is not really a very pleasant job to be in front of the UN nation. But as I said, what we have responded is too passive and inadequate. I will not repeat suggestions already made by other members. Now there are 18 members in the relevant UN committee. Can you tell us? Now, Under Secretary, you joined the delegation. Can you tell us members of the committee that were particularly unprofessional? And then the chairman is from Egypt, and the deputy chairman came from South Korea, Russia, and Colombia, etc. What was their position in the meeting? What comments did they make? Can you brief us on the behavior of different members in the committee? Now, among the 18 members, there was a representative from China, and then 8 members will have their term until 2024. I have studied the structure of UN, and I understand they were not recommended to invite them to come to Hong Kong for a visit, but there is no rule against our making statements. Can we keep sending them messages? There are 8 members who will serve until 2024, discounting the representative from China. Can we give them true information about Hong Kong so that they can make less biased comments at the next meeting, so that we can target at least 18 members? We should target at these members so that they can do away with their biases. I think such a targeted approach is most important. We cannot just follow the same routine. We should not just thank them for the untrue accusations. We should not just repeat the same old pattern. This is really very unsatisfactory.
月11號呢，就有一位
And on the 11th of November 2019, an innocent member of the public was burned alive. I think that we should repeat incidents like this so that people can remember what it was like during the Black Clad violence. Well, I believe what Dr. Lee said is exactly the sentiments that many members feel today. Mr. Wu? Mr. Lee has some suggestions regarding targeting the members of the committee. Since we are part of our country's delegation, so some of the suggestions made by members, including publicity, etc., we will report them to our country's counterpart accordingly. As for individual members' stance during the meeting, actually there is some degree of division of labor. In the committee, a certain member is responsible for asking questions to our country and Hong Kong as well. But it is my impression that during the meeting itself, the member did not sound so biased. It was only until the publication of the report did we see the very biased comments. The process itself was just question and answer and some follow-up questions as well. And we provided them with data. We also have our division of labor with our country's representatives. So there wasn't any particular member who sounded more biased than others. But I would like to know which members were responsible for issues of Hong Kong and who actually drafted the report. A few members were responsible for Hong Kong issue. Mr. Michael Winford, Vice Chairman of the committee. He was the one in charge of asking questions. That was his responsibility. And there were members from Mauritius, Belgium, Spain. These members were in charge of asking us questions. Thank you. All right, next, Mr. Leung Meng Kwong. Thank you, Chair. Well, first, to the representatives attending the meeting And for the representatives who answer questions in that meeting, I give them my respect, because I understand that after the question and answer session during the committee and then after the publication of the report, we can see that it is not like what we have pictured. No matter how strongly we oppose to their views, they have maintained their own way. The questions that they asked and the report that they have compiled, let's assume that they are not controlled by Western powers. I believe that the reason was due to the limited information that they have access to, especially the biased coverage of Western media. So they have received these biased coverage, but they do not recommend having site visits in Hong Kong. So how can we adopt targeted approach utilizing multimedia and other formats? Since there is this stubborn dissemination of misinformation, I won't quote their narrative here. Is there other things that we can do? Other than the members in charge? Can we do something to get our message across to people living there? Like ETO overseas, do we have any promotional campaigns in place? Let's say tell the good stories of Hong Kong and China. Are there any such campaigns in place? Is it possible to, let's say, place an advertisement at Times Square or other exhibitions? Can you tell us more about that? And a few years from now, we have to respond to the paper. Perhaps we can show them with actual praises or actual numbers to convince them, so that we can show them that they were wrong. So even their own people do not see Hong Kong this way. Is that something that we can consider? Thank you, Mr. Wu. Regarding the limited exposure of information, well, I don't believe that is the case. Like I said, we and other NGOs have submitted our comments to them and show them what the actual situation is like in Hong Kong, but they have chose to listen to some of the information. They chose to be biased. We have made instant clarification regarding misinformation. Our officials have conducted duty visits overseas, and we have organized major events in Hong Kong. We have also done public speaking sessions and interviews, briefings, seminars, exhibitions, etc., and to conduct promotional activities to let people know what Hong Kong is like currently. So these are the things that we have been doing. Thank you. Next, Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Chair. On the 15th, 16th of February, the United Nations has a meeting regarding issues in Hong Kong, and they have made unfounded allegations regarding the implementation of the national security law. I applaud government officials who have made responses based on facts in the meeting. There have been a lot of promotional efforts on national security law. However, these are not enough to stop the Western powers smearing campaigns. So I wonder if the government has any plan to engage in international public relations firm to clarify any misinformation and to step up promotional efforts internationally? If yes, what are your plans and what are the results? If not, then do you have any plans to do so in the short term? Thank you. And the Secretary, thank you, Mr. Yim, for your suggestion. I believe that the PR fight is a long-term battle. We have anticipated their bias. However, we will continue to do more to convince them. And we will certainly consider your suggestion of engaging a PR firm. And in the future, when there are other meetings in relation to other international conference, what can we do to do better? I have a follow-up question. Is it possible for us to do more publicity campaign through our embassies or consulates overseas? Thank you. Next, Dr. Junius Ho. Thank you, Chair. 3 questions. First, I'm not sure why this is Hong Kong's 4th report. But it is only our country's 3rd report. Second, during the whole process, what kind of lobbying efforts have we done? I understand that the meeting was set way ahead of schedule, so I wonder what kind of lobbying have we done? There have been concluding observations issued on 6th of March. So I wonder on what kind of ground did they choose not to accept the statements or reports submitted by our delegation? This is very important. How did we make our points? Of course, it is through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But then, why were the concluding observations so against us? Third, by extension, there are many NGOs focusing on economic, social, and cultural rights. From China alone, there are some 90 special consultative status, some 90 NGOs with such status. Did we liaise with them since there are so many NGOs? Did we try to engage their help to help us tell our stories? Have you been in touch with them? Thank you. Under Secretary, thank you, Dr. Ho, for your 3 questions. First, before the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, the covenant was applicable to Hong Kong already. But our country only ratified the covenant in 2001. That is why this is our 4th report, since we have submitted our 1st report before the reunification.
With regard to the NGOs, in fact, apart from ourselves, the committee has invited, in fact, they do this every time. They've invited relevant local NGOs to provide views as well. Now, this is the Committee on CSCR, and different NGOs have made comments or give views to the committee. So there were in fact more NGOs giving a fair and true picture of Hong Kong than those who didn't. So I fail to understand how they have overlooked our discourse, our explanation, and our responses. Now, if we look at the comments of NGOs and also the views they've expressed, that they have chosen to listen to the views of some other NGOs, and they have not made a more comprehensive report. As said in our press release, they have been biased and lopsided. They have overlooked the human rights situation in Hong Kong, and they have politicized our situation. Allow me to follow up, Chair. Mr. Wu, I don't have any information on what NGOs and how NGOs have spoken about us. If possible, please give me information after the meeting. It is incredible that given that this is a committee to consider economic, social, and cultural rights, and they turned a deaf ear to views made by us, and yet they have come to this conclusion. Even a court would not do so, not to mention that this is a UN committee, and then in court we have a system for appeal. Now they have made unfair comments about us. And all we have done is just the issuance of a press statement. I'm sure there is an appeal mechanism. We can complain to the UN plenary. We can say that they are unfair. They have not followed the rules. I think in a judicial system, in a Western judicial system, this is a natural law of justice. So do we have any avenue to seek redress? Mr. Wu, thank you. Dr. Ho, we form part of the country's delegation. On the 31st of March, the concluding observations were announced, and then the Central People's Government also expressed a response, a statement to the conclusions. The country has rejected the observations, saying that on questions related to Hong Kong, the report was based on lies and unfounded and untrue information, and that's the view of the country. The country said that the views were not in line with the truth. And then there were also misunderstandings about implementation of one country, two systems, and also the national security law. I got that, but is there any avenue for appeal? Now this is going to be a protracted war. No, I just want to see whether there is any appeal mechanism. I want to hear more, not just a press release. So are the conclusions here or the observations here final, and there is nothing more we can do? Now they will meet next time in 2025. So in the next report, now if I'm as a lawyer, I will check the rule book to see whether there is any avenue for appeal. No. It's just regular reports to the committee. So we can only express our own views, right? There is no real dialogue. Well, we had a dialogue with them, but they have been selective in listening to comments. So Dr. Ho would like to know whether there is any appeal mechanism, and the answer is no. So we should find another way. Mr. Kingsley Wong. Now, there is a part on trade union rights. Now, they seem to be saying that the national security law has suppressed trade unions. In fact, some people who oppose China and Hong Kong were using the loopholes in the trade unions ordinance to have a colored revolution in Hong Kong. They tried to use representatives from trade unions to influence the electoral formation and election of the CE. Before the election time, there were only about 24 or so trade unions, and then within a year, the number grew to more than 4,000. And from the labor sector, there were strong views that it was a loophole in the ordinance, and the national security law has plugged this loophole. And finally, we transitioned from chaos to stability. And I have written articles about this. And it appears that, like what Dr. Junius Ho said, the government doesn't liaise with trade unions. We can tell good stories of Hong Kong from the perspective of trade unions. Many people are using trade unions as a platform to carry out activities that undermine national security. Now they are arrested. So there were people who used trade unions as a platform to go into politics, and they were now arrested. I think in the coming couple of years, the government has to reflect to the UN more often so that they have a fuller picture of Hong Kong. Otherwise, our voice will be drowned by these international organizations. And I think we should learn a lesson, and that is to ensure that the national security law will not just punish people, because it also requires us to educate and publicize the law. This will ensure that the legitimate rights of trade unions can be protected, and to ensure that people will not abuse the loopholes to engage in activities that undermine national security. Undersecretary. Well, on the website of the UN committee, every time when they consider different conventions and also the state of implementation in different jurisdictions, they welcome different sectors to give views to the committee. Now, for this time round, there are labor organizations or NGOs who submitted reports to the UN committee. It's just that the result was still disappointing and very biased. Now, I hope you can coordinate better so that our voice is stronger. You should help organize, and put together voices from the trade unions and NGOs so that our views will carry more weight. Now it's my turn. Many members have spoken on this subject. Now, I think we've all heard the views of members, and this is not the first time we discuss reports to the UN. And the report under ICSCR is not the only report of this kind to UN. We still have the ICCPR. Let's be frank. The UN committee has made untrue comments. They are actually disseminating fake news. And how should we respond? I am grateful that you have issued a press statement to refute the accusations, but perhaps that is not enough. We should have some regular means, perhaps by holding press briefings there on the spot to point out that the report was untrue. The concluding observations were not just biased. That is not an understatement. In fact, it is untrue and inaccurate representation. So are we going to hold regular press briefings just like the spokesman for the country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Perhaps this is a possible option. And I noted that the deputy chairman made a point that we should consider. So for members of the committee, they have come to this conclusion. We are asking the basis for their coming to such observations, or perhaps it is the intention to frame us. If that's really true, that the government should send them a letter to pressurize them, to tell them that they should not treat us in this way anymore. Of course, you may say that some of them may just ignore our correspondence, but some of them may be professionals in their own country. And if they conduct themselves in such an unprofessional manner, then what they have done might have breached their own professional code of ethics. And they may think twice after receiving such a statement from the government. They may then realize that what they have done may cost them something, because they have been smearing us in the name of the United Nations at no cost to themselves. Now, if they have acted in this manner, we should set the record straight. At least they have to understand that they cannot frame us and aggrieve us in this manner. Their own professional status may be at stake. I know we have overrun, and then the deputy chairman is waiting for a second turn. Since they have come up with such a report, would the SAR government think of making our own report based on facts we have collected to tell the whole world that we are aggrieved that their report is untrue and misleading? Perhaps this is an option, because we have spoken at length hoping to help you. But I appreciate that it was not easy for us, for you, but we just want you to improve the situation. We have overrun, and I have to allow some time for the deputy chairman to speak.
Next, Dr. Hui Li, second round. Chair, I'll be succinct. I would like to follow up on the good suggestions of Chairperson. Since there are 18 members in the committee, but when I was a university student, I focused on elite studies. Is it possible for us to find out if these 18 members have any predetermined stance regarding Hong Kong based on statements that they have previously made or studies that they've done, etc.? If yes, then we have reservations for them to take on this position. And perhaps we can make this background information public as well, so that the world can see that these people cannot make a fair judgment. And I find it strange that for members who come from countries that are not that friendly to us, but there were also members from other countries, let's say Egypt, Mauritius, Thailand, etc. So there are members coming from all sorts of countries. So what confuses me is, since we have such a wide spectrum of members, how come we cannot fight for the support of enough members so that the report could remain fair? So I think that we can look into the composition of members to see what we can do accordingly. And third, I would like to add that, well, Mr. Wu and Dr. Junius Ho have both said that it was very confusing. Actually, you don't have to be confused. You just have to remember how this report came to be. Who actually wrote the first page? Was it penned by the Secretariat, or was it a particular member? After the first draft, how did the report came to be? I would like to know about the whole process in order for us to formulate a targeted approach. Because like what the Undersecretary said during the question and answer session, they actually sounded quite fair. But when we see the report, it is so biased. So I wonder if the Secretariat wrote the report or any particular member wrote it. If we know how the process is like, then we'll be able to solve some of our confusion so that we can ensure opinions are absorbed and heard fairly. Thank you. A short reply from me. I've heard your suggestions regarding promotions and other matters, and I'll relate them to our counterparts in the country. As for the composition of members, they were appointed by their respective countries. So I believe that regardless of who actually wrote the report, the whole committee will have to endorse it. In our meeting, we have heard a lot of suggestions from members, and we will definitely consider that and relate them to the relevant parties. Thank you. So that concludes this agenda item. We've overrun a bit, and we still have another item coming. I would like to invite the administration to join us for the next item, the fourth report of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region under the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So perhaps I'll invite the administration to join us first. All right. I'll now first invite Ms. Shirley Lam, Permanent Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs, to walk us through the paper, and then I'll open the floor for questions. Thank you. Chair, members, today I would like to brief members of the arrangement for the hearing of the fourth report of the Hong Kong SAR on the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is CEDAW. So next month in Geneva, the UN will go through the report regarding Hong Kong on the implementation of CEDAW. So Hong Kong will be part of the delegation, part of the Chinese delegation to join the meetings. Other than the HYAB, there are other government departments present here today will also join the meeting. So the first report was submitted in 2018, and in 2021 there were 12 issues raised. For details, please refer to NSA. We can see that there are many untrue allegations. And through the Central People's Government, we have made strong replies. For our replies, please refer to Annex B. The Room for Women's Development in Hong Kong has been ongoing since 2014. That is the last report. Women's participation in politics have raised dramatically. For non-official members in advisory and statutory bodies, women participation rate is 36%, which is an increase of 6% compared to a decade ago. And for statutory paternity leave, starting from 2019, it was increased from 3 days to 5 days. And for maternity leave, starting from 2020, it was increased from 10 weeks to 14 weeks. The current term government has placed importance on women's contribution to society and their sustainable development. In Policy Address 2022, the Chief Executive has announced the establishment of the Women Empowerment Fund, injecting $10 million into the fund to release women's potential. And in the Financial Secretary's budget, he has reserved 100 million to support women's affairs. That brings the total amount for the Women Empowerment Fund to $200 million. Starting from 2001, there were 3 reports from the UN regarding economic, social, and cultural rights, human rights, and political rights. But like in a previous discussion, members have noted that there are some biased comments and opinions in the report. We will remain steadfast in telling the international community on women's development in Hong Kong. We will tell the good stories of Hong Kong and China. And we have also planned a series of promotional efforts. Like what members have just said, we need to speak up more. We already have a plan in place. And we will let you know the details later. And as part of the Chinese delegation, of course, our promotional strategy has to be in line with our country's strategy as well. I'm happy to listen to members' suggestions. Thank you. So now the floor is open. 4 minutes questions and answers. First, Deputy Chair, Dr. Hui Li. Thank you. Well, it is not actually a question, but we have a lot of suggestions that are similar on other occasions where reports are concerned, since there were many biased or untrue allegations. Well, I wish you all the best in attending the meeting. I hope that you can fight for justice for Hong Kong on an international stage. Second, during our discussion, we have expressed a lot of suggestions and comments. We hope that on convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and other conventions, we hope that similar approaches can be adopted. Thank you. Permanent Secretary, I hope that you have noted members' opinion. Perhaps you have heard what members have just suggested in the previous item. If you have nothing to add, then I'll invite the next member to speak, Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. For CEDAW, it has been applied in Hong Kong since 1996. Gender equality is a consensus in Hong Kong. For Hong Kong women receiving higher education, the proportion is relatively high compared to other places on earth. To support women and women's employment in the current term government, there are 6 principal officials who are female. That is the highest in history. However, the proportion of women serving in higher positions, the percentage remains low. Well, in the mainland, a law on the protection of women's rights has been rolled out. So I would like to know whether the current term government has planned to do so. Second, in the mainland, maternity leave on the mainland is generally 5 to 6 months, but in Hong Kong, the maternity leave is only 14 weeks long. We want to encourage people to have children, so would you consider extending maternity leave further? Some employers, when they hire employees, they may take into account the fact that female employees may take maternity leave and therefore they avoid hiring female employees. Will the government have any policy in place to encourage employers to hire female employees? Thank you, Chair. 2 questions from me. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Yim. You are right in saying that there is a high proportion of women serving in the government, not only as principal officials, but for directorate posts in the civil service. About 40% of them are female. To respond to your questions, the first one regarding the law on the protection of women's rights. It set out women's rights in terms of political, social, and other rights, and what types of protection can we offer. In Hong Kong, through various legislations and administrative measures, we can achieve the same. We have some anti-discrimination ordinance, such as sex discrimination ordinance, a family status ordinance, etc. And we have Women's Commission and Equals Opportunity Commission to ensure women's rights are safeguarded. And we routinely review the implementation of these legislation to ensure women's rights are protected. And in 2020, we have amended the sex discrimination ordinance, especially on harassment behavior at the workplace and breastfeeding issues. As for maternity leave, it has been extended to 14 weeks. Perhaps I'll invite colleagues from the Labour Department to tell us more.
Labour Department. Thank you, member, for your question. Yes, this involves a number of policy areas. As far as the Labour Department is concerned, we always encourage employers to have family-friendly policies, such as working flexi hours, and also to give paternity or maternity leave, and to ensure work-life balance for the employees. As mentioned by the Secretary, we've increased the number of maternity leave to 14 weeks in 2020. We have taken reference from recommendations from the International Labour Organization and also other jurisdictions. We will balance the interests of both employers and employees as we continue to improve labor welfare. As regards how we tackle the problem of additional costs because of maternity leave, when we legislate to lengthen the maternity leave of female employees. The extra cost has been borne by the government to ensure that there will not be any extra financial burden on employers as a result of the improved labor interest. Mr. Kingsley Wong, yes, in terms of education and employment, we have a rather equal situation here, but in some areas, I think we should take better care of the needs of women. The labor participation rate is higher than some countries, where it's only 10% here, we're over 20%. According to statistics last year, for unmarried or single women aged between 25 and 39, their participation was over 80%, but for married women, the participation rate fell to only 60%. We have to be fair to married women to enhance their labor participation rate, because employment is not just a means, it's also an end, because work gives someone a sense of worth. So we should boost the labor participation rate of women. Can we have any KPI? We have a particular target for women participation in ASB. What about employment? Thank you. We share Mr. Wong's position. We attach importance to women's rights and interest in employment. Now, we have just set up the Women Empowerment Fund with $20 million. We welcome NGOs to apply for the fund on several themes. For instance, these themes are related to assisting employment for women. We hope NGOs can use the fund to implement projects to promote upgrading and transformation of women. For instance, that can be training and retraining, etc. We also want to assist women to use INT, new technology. If there is any training program to help women to use software, and they can become KOLs using social media, even though they are also homemakers. We also want to assist women to enhance their sense of worth, to unleash the potential, and to enhance their positive attitude. So if there are such worthy causes, we will support. But then the CE should be result-oriented. We should set a target first. We should first have the KPIs. For instance, in Singapore, the women labor participation rate is very high because they have tax concessions for working mothers. We can compare with Singapore so that we know whether we're doing enough to support women at work. Will we have such KPIs? Labor participation rate of women is subject to a number of factors. If we want to have a hard KPI, that may not be entirely appropriate. But we have heard Mr. Wong's views. We will see whether we can have better ways and means to encourage women to join the workforce. It's now my turn. Of course, you're going to the UN committee in May. We wish you every success. You have received a lot of input from us. I'm sure that will help your preparation. Of course, in Hong Kong, when it comes to women participation in employment and politics and various community affairs, our women are very outstanding, and we attach high importance to our women in Hong Kong. But when it comes to labor participation, in particular, if we are talking about women who have to take care of families as well, I have some suggestions for you. I have followed up on this issue. I understand that the Labor and Welfare Bureau is conducting a review on neighborhood childcare services. If you have the findings available when you attend the hearing by the UN, perhaps you can include that in your report as well. And how can we unleash the potential of women in labor participation? I think childcare service is a very important point. There are NGOs under SWD providing after-school childcare service, but many of them are only open on weekdays, but not at weekends. We understand that many grassroots women have to take care of their families. They cannot afford hiring a foreign domestic helper. Now, they may want to work part-time at weekends, but then it's exactly during weekends that no childcare service is available. Perhaps you may want to improve your services in this regard. And we want to unleash the potential of women so that they can also make extra money. Can we encourage organizations to employ part-time workers so that women can work part-time as well as look after their families? As the secretary said, perhaps they can be KOLs at home, and they may be part-time drivers, commercial drivers. That may be a way out. If you're already doing this, perhaps you can include that in your report. These are positive things to tell, because you should go out there and tell them what we are doing to help women. Again, this is a way to tell good stories of Hong Kong. That's my suggestion. Yes, you made a very good point, Chair. We have heard from the community that to unleash the work potential of women, childcare services is an important point. They need someone to look after their children before they can work. So we adopt a multi-pronged approach. As far as my bureau is concerned, under the Women Empowerment Fund, when we receive applications from NGOs, we have this new measure. The funding source can include an element to fund activities for children who come along with their mother for training. So this will encourage more women to take part in training programs. As said, the SWD is reviewing after-school childcare services to see what improvements can be made. So we will put together all these new measures, and when we are in front of the committee, we can tell them our progress in this area. I'd like to defer to the SWT to see if they have anything to add on childcare services. SWT, please. Yes, to support working women who cannot look after their own children. We've been sponsoring different NGOs to provide childcare services. We understand that some women may need services of a longer duration. So we have provided extra funding to childcare centers. And we've also got the neighborhood childcare support scheme, which is under review. Is being implemented in all 18 districts so that apart from childcare centers, we have a home-setting childcare service available. And we understand that some childcare centers are very popular, and we are boosting our after-school childcare program. We have added additional resources to NGOs. Apart from weekdays, they can provide childcare or after-school childcare service at weekends and also in the evening. So we are reviewing our services to improve them, to cater for the needs of women in Hong Kong. Yes, I think this is an important subject because many grassroots women require childcare services at weekends. I don't see any other member waiting to ask questions. So we thank the Permanent Secretary and her colleagues for coming to this meeting. Hopefully, when you attend the relevant UN meeting in May, I think what we said might be useful. So we wish you every success. Hopefully you can tell good stories of Hong Kong. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you. That concludes this item. The next item is AOB. We don't have any. So thank you very much for your attendance. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.